and welcome to Living One. I'm your host, Olivia Crossman. Living One is Kerulos' monthly webinar series, now in its fifth year. With guest speakers from around the world, we listen in to how people are bringing their ethics, minds, and lives into alignment with nature for earth and animal liberation and revitalization. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? Most importantly, how do we get from wrong to right? When there is so much to change and to heal, where do we begin? What's the first step? What is the path each of us can undertake to make positive, deep, transformative change, not only as individuals, but as a collective whole? What is ours to do? Let's talk about it. Today is our final session of Living One for 2024, and we are so glad to have a very special guest closing out such a wonderful year of conversations. Over the course of 2024, Living One heard from individuals who have forged a range of unique and inspiring paths to help transform and heal Earth, animals, and human society. Thank you so much for joining us for another year of rich conversations to learn how individually and in community we can take the necessary, concrete, timely steps towards a right world, a world of peace and wellness for all Earth beings. Our guest today is Betty Kovac. Betty received her doctorate from the University of California, Irvine in comparative literature and the theory of symbolic mythic language. She taught mythology and fairy tales as literary structures that reveal the organizing principles of human development, as well as comparative literature and writing. She served many years as chair and program chair on the board of directors of the Jung Society of Claremont in California and sits on the academic advisory board of Forever Family Foundation. Among her numerous other publications, she is the author of Merchants of Light, The Consciousness That's Changing the World, and The Miracle of Death, There is Nothing But Life. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various Indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Kerulos Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, Takelma, Dakubedete, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. Finally, we ask that all of us participate with full respect and attention to each other in the spirit of peace and wisdom that Living One seeks to foster. So without further ado, we welcome Dr. Betty Kovacs. Hi, Betty.
Hi, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you on. Do you want to start us off by telling us a little bit about what you cared about as a child and whether or not this was encouraged?
You know, I was reading those questions and wondering, and I thought, from one point of view, I was a child in nature. We lived in the country, and I had a brother 3 years older than I, and we played all the time. And at first I thought, well, I can't remember anything I was really concerned about. I was just, as children, we're totally present in nature and just experiencing it. But of course, there were very natural questions that came during that time of play in this beautiful countryside. It was that, and I think my brother probably came up with it first, is just, how come all this anyhow? We kind of got this, what's going on here? Where'd this come from? And I remember my brother saying to my mother, I don't remember going to Sunday school that young. We did later, but he had some concept of God as a male and heaven. And he said to mother, he said, when I die, I'm going to walk right up to God and I'm just going to ask, how come all this anyhow? So I guess that was one of the questions we had. And then not long after that, I guess it was a pretty natural question also to come to kids, is that, well, what if it didn't exist? But we put it in our children's language, which was, what if there wasn't a world? What if there wasn't a world? So here, the whole idea of nothingness, we didn't think in those terms, it's just, what if there wasn't a world? So we had a game that we would close our eyes, squint our eyes tight, and then we would just repeat over and over again, what if there wasn't a world, wasn't a world? And I can remember thinking that I got to a place where there was nothing, but it was like,
Mm,
it wouldn't last. It was like, boom, out of that was a great explosion of creation. Everything
mm,
came back. And I didn't think much about that. We went about our ways growing up and doing things. But when I was studying classical literature, I was just delighted to see uh, the lines, all being is rooted in non-being.
mm,
That's out of nothingness, out of what we think of as is no form, is constantly exploding into form. So I think those were the thoughts we had. But I think those questions stayed with me because I realized when I did go to Sunday school, I I thought there was a wonderful image of Jesus, this loving, kind, heart-centered person, and the teachings were valuable, but I couldn't believe in the Christian message. And so then later I came in contact with a scientific message that there's nothing but matter and you're only a fluke of nature. There's no meaning, there's no purpose, and when you're dead, you're dead. Well, neither of those scientific or religious worldviews satisfied me. So that was my search. What's it all about anyhow? So I went to
yeah,
college, and of course there I was confronted, well, with both views, but especially the scientific view. So my life just became a search for that. And I
mm,
knew one thing that I knew absolutely was looking for. I didn't want a belief system. I didn't want to believe a thing. I wanted to know it through my own experience. And
mhm,
I came into contact with Carl Jung in my last year of college. And I was just amazed because that was exactly what he was looking for, experience.
mm,
You have to experience it to know it. And he said some people can believe, and that's good, but I knew I wasn't one of those persons.
mm. Absolutely. That's so interesting. And it really is incredible how early you were formulating these questions with your brother. Were your parents, did you ask them these things? Did you guys have conversations about this as a kid,
Yeah.
where or was it more between you and your brother?
I think, uh, no, we didn't talk with them about it when we were young. It was just between my brother and me, and and I think it's probably not unusual because uh, this was before television, you know, and there was no television. And radio, we did have a radio, but there was only one 30-minute program for children a week. We listened to that, and that was that. But we were outside all the time. And
Yeah.
I remember us thinking that we had heard that adults like to sleep. We couldn't even imagine because we didn't want to go in to go to bed to sleep. We thought that was the strangest thing. So, no, it was just something that we discussed. And of course, we created our own worlds, of what was going
Yeah.
on, uh, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I grew up in that kind of world because our roots were then in nature.
Mhm.
And
That's beautiful. And now, how would you describe your present? You spoke so eloquently about the journey and the searching. What was the process of finding these not beliefs, but what finding what you know now? How would you describe that?
it's a long journey. And there weren't too many people I could talk with
Sure.
about it. And later, my brother gave up the search.
Mm,
Um, and I think that's what happens to a lot of people. I said to him, "Why did you give this up? Why aren't you thinking this way anymore?" And he said, "Well, there comes a time when you just have to give it up. You have to make a living and you have to go on." And he lost something. He lost that real spark of life. And I
mm,
think that that's what happens to many people. And
yeah.
I could go on doing it because I went to college and then I could teach. And in teaching, we were always discovering and talking to students about it. And that was great. So it was just a long search. And so then I went to get my doctorate at the UCI, and that was certainly the last place I was going to find anything out about spirituality. And so when I finished, although I'm grateful for what I did learn, but after I finished that, I thought, I've given it to the left brain. And so I'm going to go to South America And I saw that there was a way to go there. And a friend of mine from Ecuador who was here, we were close friends and always exploring the worlds together too. She had been a student of mine actually earlier. So we decided we would go to South America. And,
Mm.
uh, and that was an introduction. Uh, we were in nature all of the time we were there with rituals in nature. Uh, and and I think it was an opening once again of being really observant of what's happening in nature, and and beginning to understand that I my body is a part of the field, and whatever
Hmm.
I'm thinking will be registered in the field and reflect back to me. Just getting some idea of that, which shamanism kind of brought back to me in a way,
Mm.
was healthy. And I did have experiences. Uh, and there with the shamans we worked with San Pedro in South America, sacred medicine, and there were it did kind of loosen up the control of the left brain, to
Mm.
some degree, so that the right brain and the heart, the whole visionary world, began to open up. But it was a long,
Mhm.
slow journey because I wanted to know about these things that, uh, of the heart. But
Yeah.
the only path that I had in those days was to go to university, and it wasn't the best of all possible paths to learn about the heart.
Yeah.
And so, uh, and then of course, Jung was a great mentor to me. I was very, very grateful that I had found him
Mm.
and that I read and read and read, and he did open up those worlds for me. And so I paid very close attention to my dreams. That was one way of being in touch a little bit with what was going on. And those dreams did lead me. They did guide me through a lot of things. But it wasn't until I was married and had a child, and our son was 20 years old when he was killed in an automobile accident. And he had been interested in these things too. And so it was after his death that both my husband, who had not been that interested in these matters, and I had powerful experiences with him, conversations long term. And sometimes they were spontaneous, sometimes in dreams, and also with sacred medicine or simply meditating, listening to music. He was there. And there were
Mm.
just he wanted us to remember why we were born, why he had was leaving at 20. And he also wanted us to know that the world was going to be going through some very serious changes, and that
Mm.
this was a very important time because there was going to be a shift uh, away from the kind of world that I was brought up in and
Mm.
constantly looking for. And my husband had one of the visions he had was that if we can do what we came to do, then children will be born knowing these things. So I think it's as though we come in waves, and each wave uh, shifts the world and makes
Mhm.
it more open for those who come later. That,
Mm.
so that was when the
That's
opening really took place. Only then did I know there is no death, that
mm.
consciousness continues.
That's so beautiful and just profound. It was the experience of speaking with him in this way, something that you naturally fell into? Did you have to work at it, cultivate it? How did that and did you have experience like that prior to these experiences with him? Or was it kind of a surprise, I guess, for lack of a better word?
It's well, since I was always looking and opening
Sure.
myself to uh, to the other world, I was always looking for that. And as I said, my husband was not. And
Yeah.
uh, 2 weeks before the accident, he had a vision in his office here that suddenly he saw our son's body superimposed on his car, and the car was off the side of a freeway. And he knew he was dead because there were two different dimensions. And then he said, heard himself say, which shocked him, "Oh, that's right. It's almost time for you to do this." And he said, our son said, "That's right, Dad. I'll be out of the house for a little while." Well, and then my husband they completely forgot everything, was completely unconscious. It wasn't until the call came through that he was in the hospital that that vision came back to my husband. But he didn't say anything until he had actually died because he kept thinking maybe he will live. But he felt quite certain he wouldn't. So that was his beginning. After the death, it's just so we just plunged into vision. My husband said sometimes, like going to work, it was like there was a tape recorder going off that just
Mm,
remembering all of these things that he'd forgotten. And then there were other times, especially with the meditation and music or sacred medicine, it was just the most natural thing in the world. Is that here is this other dimension so filled with love and understanding that it was just there. So naturally, there
mm,
would be questions and answers. And very often, our son was there. Very often, it was just a voice that was answering the questions,
mm.
which I'd sought for a lifetime. So it wasn't a short journey, I would say. I think I hear from people so often now who are having incredible experiences and people are doing incredible things, which I didn't know anything about when I was young. And so I
Mm.
think there is a tremendous shift taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. The movement of it now is so just intense with everybody's different kind of collective experience of what's happening
Yes.
and shifting, and um, that's really incredible. And you mentioned throughout your journey to childhood to the present, how important nature and the earth and your relationship with the earth has been. Can you speak a little bit to that and maybe what those influences have been for you over this path?
Well, they were in the beginning, and then we moved to the city. And
Mm.
I was It's strange when I was in college. I was always planning to get a place up in the Ozark Mountains where I chop my own wood, drew my own. I didn't know how I thought I was going to live like that alone, but I was always looking for that. So it was sort of like a Walden, I guess, to be
Mhm.
out and probably quite unaware of what I'd really have to do. But it didn't happen. And even at the year that my husband he was killed 2 years later in another car accident. But in those 2 years, we had bought land, a forest with a creek running through it. That's where we are going to build a house and live. But it seems like I always ended up in a city, Now here in Claremont, California, we're close to LA, but I don't go into LA. I almost never go in. And it feels more like country and lots of trees and things around. But I think that my relationship to it was lost
Mm.
during a lot of that time. And and I think Jung helped me to realize what had been lost. Uh, and also the study of mythology and the lives of our ancestors is that they knew that there was nothing more important than knowing the laws of nature. And
Mm.
then, of course, in the High Middle Ages, the literature with the search for the Grail, and just reading those stories about how there was that sense of the presence in nature of these feminine beings, these maidens at the well, who were symbolic and real of that loving present dimension. And I see Wim Funnes here, who's written so beautifully about that, about the feminine in nature. And he could tell us so much about that. I loved your work, and in fact, I still reading them. Uh, and it was so prevalent in the High Middle Ages that the wells and people would go there and they were fed from the golden bowl. They were given what they needed. That was so just the possibility of
Mm.
conscious presence in nature I had lost. And I think this was the renaissance of this ancient shaman mystic tradition that had existed earlier, but the church had forbidden. And here in the High Middle Ages, we became aware of it again in such beautiful stories. And I think that sort of awakened me again. And I wanted to, and going to South America helped me. The second time we went to South America, we were the first group who did the Incan journey from place to place. and to feel and actually experience at one point beings who surely were not from this dimension that did appear to us, then it confirmed for me, yes, the world is enchanted. We just have to be,
Mm,
we have to learn how to be open to it.
mhm. Absolutely. And that openness that you're talking about is something that, at least at Kerulos, we talk about as something that is in all of us and just figuring out how to kind of awaken it or remind people of it. Because exactly as you described in childhood, it's such a natural thing for children to go out into the world and just kind of
Mhm.
wonder in awe at it all and finding that again in adulthood and making sure to cultivate it is you just spoke to that beautifully. But you mentioned so you're today you're writing. Are you still teaching as you were?
No, I retired when, as it turned out, my mother was killed by a car in one year, and my son the next year. And as a matter of fact, he was taken off life support the very day that she was killed one year before, and the hour. These synchronicities are something that make us pay attention also to the laws
Yeah.
of nature. And then my husband was killed 2 years later in his native Hungary. He had gone to Hungary and he was killed there in a car accident. So I retired at that time and have been writing and now I love the podcast, this kind of thing, and writing and it just one thing that is so inspiring for me is hearing from people all around the world uh,
Mm.
of what is going on in their lives and what they are contributing. It's very inspiring to know that. And thank God for this technology, you know. Uh,
Yes, absolutely. And that was really the intention for us with this webinar series this year was to have people come on and talk about their lives and their paths to doing the work that they feel they were here to do. Because exactly as you said, it's so inspiring to know people's individual journeys and what it's been like for them to where they are today. And um, in
well,
your work, would sorry, go ahead.
no, that's fine.
In your work today, do you feel that this everything that you mentioned is when you were a kid and this kind of searching and wanting to know, do you feel that that's been fully integrated into your work and your life, just your experience today? Is there or is there more that you feel there is to integrate or to know?
I'd have to get busy doing it with the years I have left. Uh, I think that I did do what I could do. You
Mhm.
always look back and think, I wish I could have, you always think more. And I think it's, we don't need to think more. We need to think about the quality or the value of what it was in our lives, to
Mhm.
try to appreciate. And so many times I would just sort of receive a message, honor your own work. We are
Mhm.
so capable of seeing the value in other people's work, but sometimes we don't see the value in our own work. And it's so important that we recognize that what our ancestors wanted to teach us is that we are all divine. This great
Mhm.
explosion or into time and space is of the divine, and we are all divine, and
Mhm.
we are all immortal, and we are all creative. And each one of us is creative. That means doing things in a different way and giving that gift, that piece of the puzzle to the whole. And it's
Mhm.
so, so important that we value each piece. Not that it'd be a great big old piece that you put in the biggest piece. I grew up with people saying they wanted to write the great American novel. That's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is to exquisitely create whatever it is we can create that is
Mhm.
ours and put it in the puzzle. And that point, and all together we create the whole. So I don't have any regrets about not having done something. I did what I could do, and I enjoyed life along the way. And that's so
That's
important.
wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
earth needs us to experience joy. Joy and love. The earth needs it because that's the source of all of nature and of all creativity.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Were there any As far as this understanding that you have now, were there specific I guess moments that you remember that stand out among the rest that lend themselves to your knowing these things, or was it just kind of a combination of experiences over time?
Well, I would say that the visionary world, being
Mm,
open to, first of all, through Jung to the dream world, and then with the death of our son, it really opened me to a larger visionary world. But also, I I had a vision, and I was with two other women, and we worked with sacred medicine. I did, they were there, and it was a ritual for the healing of the children of the world, our own children, that was before
mm,
the death, really, and the children of the world. And I think this was the most extraordinary experience I have ever had. And I was still in the stage of doubting things. My left brain was still kind of controlling things. But with that vision, I had to say to myself, there's no way you couldn't have made this up. There's no way anybody can deny the absolute power of this vision. And the vision was
mm,
that a disc of light came in the room where we were meditating, and it came through the glass doors and it hovered over my head. And I could feel that this was a consciousness so powerful that I couldn't really hold it. But in that moment,
mm,
a feminine being circled out of the bottom of it and went into the crown chakra, the top of my head, and went into my heart. And so then I was even lifted up as she sang through me. And I have that in Merchants of Light, that experience
mm,
is that we are the light. We are the light surrounding your planet. You have called us. And then it said, your planet has called us, and we are here. And then suddenly I knew a lot of things. I knew that this light had been around the planet for a long time, and it came from the cosmos. It was there, light beings, but they hadn't been able to connect fully to the planet until now, that now they
mm,
could. And now they did. And we could feel that connection, feel ourselves as a part of helping that connection. And, uh,
mm,
and I felt that this was probably going on all over the planet, is that people were connecting that light, even if they didn't know it, through love, through loving, they connecting and anchoring it in the earth. And I knew that we were shifting, that things were absolutely different because of this, that
mm,
now that light that was there had been so long and now it could connect to the earth, that something very different was going to happen on the earth, that we had
mm,
drawn that light to us by love, by the love and the longing for everything, for longing for a world we want to bring our children up in. That longing and that love had
mm,
allowed us to anchor the light. And the interesting thing is that uh, a few years later, I read that in Sri Aurobindo's ashram, that the mystics had said that they had experienced that in the 50s, because we experience it as now is happening, but
mm,
now is always now in the universe. So, but I thought it was really interesting that they had said then that everything is going to be different on the planet, because that light, we've allowed that light to flow in from the top, flow in through us into the earth, and our connection then with the earth was much greater. So that was,
mm,
I'm grateful for every vision that I had, and especially those with our son. But that was a vision that changed my life. That I would say, yes, that's one thing
mm.
that I knew I couldn't reduce it in any way.
Yes, I see why. That's quite powerful. It's hard to argue with that. And you mentioned the left brain is something that you had to kind of integrate as you moved forward. And were there were there other barriers either in yourself or around you that you had to kind of overcome or work through as you moved through this journey?
Well, we could really add it all up to left brain. And that's what I talk about so much in my book is that in the
Yeah.
West, especially and now the world, there have been various historical events that have occurred that have isolated us into the left brain.
Mm,
And when we look around and see all the horror in the world today, it's because we have not activated all of the parts of our brain. The
mm,
right brain, of course, even by 1700, one of the first symbolic theorists knew he understood what the mythologies had understood all along, and that the left and right brain must work together. And he put it
mm,
so beautifully. He said that the left and right brain must always create a dynamic and integral
mm,
continuum of movement. And that's why mythology called it the sacred marriage, is that you have to always be consulting with each other. The left brain always has to give its information back to the right brain because the right brain has the meaning, the context, the connection with
mhm,
the love and the heart, and then the heart can connect it to the cosmos. So
mhm,
yes, that was the only way I could learn anything or try to find out was to go to the university, which put me in the left brain. Then I had to try to overcome that. But I think that's very typical of our whole culture now, the world,
yeah.
is that people value anything you can do that's left brain. But what what I think the new age will have to be and is becoming is that
Mm,
from early on we value the right brain and the dreaming visionary mind, that we learn how to integrate these great hemispheres of
mhm,
consciousness flowing through the heart. And the Sufis had it right, and other mystics, that the heart, of course, gives more to the brain than the brain gives to the heart. I mean, it's
mhm,
the fifth brain component. And now through heart math, scientists have talked about this and know this and are doing a lot of research. But that it is this heart consciousness that connects us to the cosmic
mm,
consciousness, the consciousness of the
mm,
cosmos. And we all have it. But we've not been taught how to use it, and we've forgotten
yeah.
how. And I think that this is what, uh, of course, we begin to understand how to do that in nature uh, when we can allow nature to speak to us, to be with us. And there are various ways, but I think this is, of course, how we will save ourselves is by it's just like being in a vast spaceship, you know, and
Yeah.
all that we can do is push a button and roll on the ground. We don't know how to work all these other buttons that could take us out into the cosmos. And I think that's what we're going to learn how to do. We're learning.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And is there, what would you say to people starting on that path of just trying to connect with the heart, connect with the right brain, to maybe open themselves to these kinds of experiences that you're speaking about? Where can people start?
Well, I wish that as a culture, we could make those starting points available to
Mm,
everybody. You know, our schools are not set up uh, to develop the whole mind. I think we've got a lot to learn. And I
yeah.
think that, yes, as we begin to follow what we feel, follow what we love, and and listen, because the body will give us all kinds of information, you know.
Mm,
It's a beautiful thing that I think when it's like, who are we anyway? And I love the scientific view that we really are like a nested set of Russian dolls. Is that here's the atom, and then the human body, the human being, and then the planet, and then the solar system, the galaxy, the universe. We are so integrated into nature, you know, from that atom all the way through. There's no way we can be separate from it, except we create stories that we're separate. And of course, when
mhm,
people do that, they want to control us. But if we really, and it's a hologram. And so at every point in this hologram, of which we're so integrally related to and a part of, there's all of the knowledge of the universe is at every point in the hologram. And at every point in the hologram is the heart. So we're all
Mm.
at the heart of the universe. We're all at the heart of the cosmos. This is the most remarkable thing. And I think if we learn that, oh my God, there's no way we are so much apart from the atom all the way to the the universe, the galaxies of which we are part,
Mhm.
that we
Mhm.
are so intricately related. And if we could just focus as a culture, individually and as a culture, on how, I don't know that, I don't know how to tell people to what to start with. I just think we're learning this together, and
Yeah.
each of us brings a piece of the puzzle of how we're going to do this to really begin to realize, oh my God, we have, I mean, artificial intelligence is a symptom of the left brain culture that has
Yeah.
developed a huge left brain, but with no right brain or heart. And fine, it can work to relieve us of some kind of activity we don't need to be involved in. But the whole point is, how do we use the intelligence we have to live a sacred life, to live a joyful, loving life, and also to open us up to the cosmos, to a consciousness that's far beyond AI
Mhm.
intelligence, far beyond
Mhm.
that, because we have to have the heart to be able to experience this vastness. So the vastness is available, but we can't live with it in everyday life all the time. But
Sure.
it's that we are creators. So a creator always, like Rodin with his big slab of stone, he has to take away stone in order for something beautiful to appear.
Yeah.
So art is always limitation. So how do
Mhm.
we work with that? How do we create that life? Each one of us has to find our own way in that, I think.
Mm.
And that's
Beautiful.
part of the creativity of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so beautiful, Betty. And I'm sure people here, I know Gay has questions that she'd like to ask you too. And I'm sure our audience does as well. So I'll turn it over to Gay to ask her portion of the questions. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
I've
you.
learned so much already.
Thank you.
Oh, I think it's unfair to have me start because I have so many questions.
Do you want to kick us off, Gay? And if others have
I'll
questions
start
that
and
they want
then I'll keep
to.
my
Okay.
mouth. First of all, this is totally mundane, but I love your Jung books. I have a whole shelf of them, and
Oh, they're be,
that was
behind me, yeah.
my big splurge when I got my degree. I bought the entire set.
Ah.
So it was lovely, and it's so fun to see other friends on your shelf as well. Thank you so much, Betty. It's such a thrill to have you here, and the coming year is the title of the Different Living One, and kind of our outlook is this seeing the unseen and restoration through reenchantment. So you're speaking in that way, and your experiences are just perfect to really ignite this whole thing. And then I guess that's our one of our main things is, okay, stop looking in the past in the sense of what's wrong. That's our theme. And wow, how do we want things to be? What can we do? And when I say have fun, in the sense of revel in, as you call it, love in that way. One specific thing, and I loved your notion of the visionary world and the light connection. And I'm just going to speak from my experiences because I'm embedded with non-humans all the time. And I guess my question to you is, the vision of the light beings that came to you and that we're speaking, that are connecting here. It, in my feeling, I feel like the plants and the animals with whom I live are already connected to those light beings, and they're seeing all these things and experiencing and communicating all these things, and it's just us, who have our ears closed because of the educational and cultural arc that we've been conditioned to or subjected to. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree with you. I was thinking of our two cats, for example, before I received word of my husband's death. He was in Hungary, so my brother-in-law came to tell me. It was very interesting that 2 weeks before, they did very strange things, and they wanted to go out. I let them out, and then I heard some strange voice, and I thought, that's strange. But I went back to bed, and I thought, maybe I should be more concerned about that, what might be out there. But I looked at the time, and it turned out that it was exactly the same time that that Ishvan, my husband, had been killed, and 2 weeks later. But the interesting thing is that I let them out, and the next morning they were both inside the house. I mean, they're just these things. It was, and sometimes these things you don't know what to make of them. But there was some, we might say, unnatural thing about. There was no way those cats could have gotten in the house, But it was almost. I felt like they were, in some way, alerting me to be aware of things don't always work the way your science tells you it works. We were outside, very well you put us outside. Everything was locked. And in the morning, they were right inside the house. So I thought at the time they had some uncanny feeling because it was exactly at the hour later. And, sometimes you can't make sense of it. You think, well, so it was just, that just was a coincidence. But I didn't think so. There was some feeling that just opened me up to some phenomenal difference. But I think that's just one simple, situation. I think that there, if when people are in nature, they are constantly communicating with different beings, and they know that it's real. They're not hallucinating. And I think the communication that the cats gave me with that was an opening to a phenomenal world, that something was going to happen at that hour.
Oh, as C.G. Jung says, there are no coincidences,
Right. Meaningful, yeah.
in that sense. And then that leads me, into this, this shift of, I'm calling it, you said this visionary world, is that so often we tend to call them anecdotes, or, oh, isn't that interesting? There was a fellow named Prince Anthony, I believe is Anthony, and he was a South African, and you might have heard about him, and he had saved all these elephants. And when he died, all the elephants came, from miles and miles away, to pay homage, and they knew.
So
And Daphne Sheldrick, who founded the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, is amazing. She always spoke. She died recently, but she always, she was a bread and butter kind of person, right? And she said, elephants are telepathic. And so my question to you is, how do we cultivate, because a large part of it is, if I said to you, oh, I got hit in the head with a red ball, you wouldn't question it. It's like, oh, really? Do you have a headache? But if we share these things, there's always this kind of iffiness about it, anecdotalness. What do you suggest in terms of, I mean, if like, we're talking right now and nodding our heads, how do we, to me, I think that the quote unquote social component is very important in terms of fortifying an individual to be able to quote believe themselves, or to develop. And it's not, I am, I feel therefore I am. I mean, there's obviously an integrity that's associated with it. But how do we cultivate a way of encouraging each other, and exploring without kind of this, there are quote unquote makeup types of things, but in the sense of cultivating those senses, and appreciating and encouraging, seeing the unseen, and doing that just kind of opens doors and opens doors and opens doors.
Well, I think, first of all, listening to each other, and being able to, like, even after I told about the cats, I thought, oh, that wasn't a significant enough example, thinking that someone wouldn't be. But it is significant when we feel something. If whatever that act is makes us feel something deeply and open up something, like we know something, and that you can't explain that too well, this sort of strange event. I mean, no matter how simple it may seem to be, if it was a feeling event, something that you really feel to be, and then we have to honor it. And I think that by telling others who will listen to us, my situation was at the college, I mean, people were loving and kind as I went through these deaths, but I couldn't talk to them about any of these other things that were actually healing and helpful, because they didn't know what to do with it. And so I think that we have to have some experience ourselves to, and we probably all had experiences, but we have to honor them enough to know that we feel comfortable in telling them, and then hopefully they can be heard. But I just think if we can listen and really open to what someone is saying and honor it, if they were changed by it, they felt something extraordinary about it. But it's really, of course, I was, my childhood and adulthood and college years, university years, was certainly with all left brain practically. And so I will still fall into being cautious, And I think that given time, I think that a lot of people are experiencing things and they're talking about them. And we have a radio show in which people call in and talk about their experiences. Or Dave is called the Visionaries. It's a group that gets together online and they tell what they've experienced because they don't have other people to talk to. And together they can tell each other and know that they won't be, dismissed. So I think that's our way of trying to give people a place so that they can feel confident in talking about extraordinary things and not be dismissed. Because it's a terrible feeling. I remember telling one of my really good friends at the college what had happened, and he started walking backwards. I mean, just to get away from me as fast as he could. And he was a good friend, and he wanted to be kind, but he couldn't. It just was too much for him. So I think those of us who can listen and hear and respond, that's healing, that's helpful.
And it seems to me that, it's just a sort of open recognition of there is this other quote unquote reality in which what we call as reality is embedded. So
Yes.
just that open recognition and feeling more comfortable with saying, well, I'm not quite sure how everything connects, but I know that there's reality,
Yeah.
and in that way, I think is so very important.
But just, to honor the experience,
Yes.
even if someone, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah. Like I said, I have so many questions and whatever. But I think that's a really critical thing. And again, and just in a micro way, what we're trying to invite is a space where the unseen or the whatever is real in whatever way. And that I think the implications, one of the things too, and maybe you can speak to it, is so having these experiences and visions in this visionary world, how has that changed how you live in your everyday life? I know that sounds kind of funny, but do you know what I mean? In other words, even how you relate to other people, there's, how it changes our relationships with people, even if they may not be of that, but how is that, how did that translate to you, or how has that translated over time for you? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think since I was always looking for it, there was always the possibility of it. And I meet with people all the time with whom I can't speak about these things. And if I try, usually there's silence, But I love them, and I know that that they will open up when they can. So I think it's pretty much the same. I mean, if you have friends and you love them, you're the same. And with those that you can say something, then you do. I think that it's going to be more and more that as young people come in and they're opening up to this, and that there's going to be the ability to speak and to share so much more. So naturally, there are people I'm very close to who do have the same experiences and with whom I can share it, and that's one kind of, and yet there are so many people that we love each other, but we can't speak about those things, mainly from my college,
I'll just share one thing of my own, and then I'll open it because I don't want to monopolize you. I had an experience years ago, and there was a gentleman that I loved his writing. It was just so moving and just incredible. And I went to visit him and his family, and he was I'll just tell his name is Vine Delore. He's an American Sioux scholar, and he's a sterling person. And it was the first time that we had met. We had corresponded. And he's a Sioux scholar and a legal scholar. And I remember we were talking, and he was talking about buffaloes from the sun, that from the Sioux culture, that these giant, huge buffaloes, emerged from the sun. And there's a whole story about it. And I had this experience where there's this little voice, and that this was milliseconds. This little voice saying, "Buffaloes from the sun, buffaloes from the sun." Well, that's ridiculous. And then the other little voice is saying, "Well, why would, I mean, you believe him, you love him, you know he's incredible, why would you doubt that?" Well, that sounds really weird. But anyways, the point being is that
Yeah.
I had a choice. Am I going to go, "Oh, really? Uh-huh, yeah"? Or was I really going to stay engaged with him in that sense? And I did. And I had what I consider to be, it felt like some kind of dissolving of all these neural pathways in me. The way I describe it is that if you had one of those zebra things, when you go to the market, if you'd done it before and afterward, I would have looked completely different. And the essential ingredient was love. I kept the opened because I loved him. He's a sterling, incredible person. And that was really what I felt was this dissolving of these neural pathways, for lack of a better term, in that way. So I really resonated when you talk about that love. It's at this fundamental level of openness and boundlessness.
Yes, and I think that's a good example of our training, the kind of training that we get in life and living, especially in the Western world, is that that's what we hear all the time. It's just like people today who listen to only corporate news, and that's the world that they live in, and everybody repeats it, and it's everywhere, and that's the way it was. So those neural pathways are there, and I think we have to work with them. Especially after our son's death, I had really powerful visions. I knew in the vision that it was absolutely reality. And then when I wasn't in the vision, my left brain would sort of come in. It was as though it had been programmed, which it had, but I didn't think that, because I didn't consciously believe that, but it had evidently picked up unconsciously the programming that it was superior, that it was, that if you couldn't prove something by the left brain standards, then it couldn't be real, and that it was superior to all other aspects of the brain. And I thought, I don't even think that way, but yet I had to do business with it, just as you did, But how much I think we get better and better at it. But I just so want to live in a world where we know that when those elephants came, for example, or the buffalo, that we know that's having those elephants come, as you explained in that, it's so sacred and so beautiful. It just shows that there's something so sacred and so powerful within nature. And we get these stories occasionally, but I want to live in a world where we hear those stories often and know and experience it,
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'll give the space to others. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Gay. Yes, if anyone else has anything that they'd like to ask or comment, this is the time to do so. You can unmute or raise your hand, type it in the chat, however you would like. But we'll leave a little time for that now.
Yeah, maybe I can say something.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, I'm Wim Bonus from the Netherlands. And Betty Kovacs mentioned me earlier in the talk, which was nice.
Yeah.
But so I'm probably the only one from the other side of the world, I imagine. No, but one thing what I think about is, these days, so many people live in cities, and most of the people live in cities, and we have to reconnect with nature. I wonder, well, how do we do that with so many people living in cities, these days? It's very important. Like we're embedded in nature all the time, even if we're living in cities. But to get people to be more aware of that, even when they're living in cities, even when they're living, for instance, in a skyscraper, on the 10th floor, far away from direct contact with the natural world.
Yeah, I thought of that during COVID. What about those people in New York City living in
Yeah,
such skyscrapers and not able to get out of their
yeah,
apartment? And I think of myself as being surrounded by nature. You know, my study is
yeah,
here and I'm surrounded, but it's not in deep nature where
mm,
the animals are. And, you know, it's not like being, I'm glad I have it and I'm grateful for it. But it's not like being in nature where you can experience a lot of
yeah,
different aspects of it, but at least it's better than a skyscraper. But I
yeah.
don't
Well,
know. I don't know the answer to that question.
yeah. Well, we go into nature, of course, like on holidays. You know, I live myself now in, well, it's a town. You know, really a big city. You know, but I live in the Netherlands, and well, nature is very sparse in the Netherlands. You know, other countries have a lot more. You know, and but still, I go out. You know, like the story I sent to you. You know about
Yes,
the
yes.
feminine apparitions in nature. And I was inspired a lot by my visit to Lourdes. You know,
Hmm.
and that apparition that originally actually happened in nature in a cave outside
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
living world, outside, say, outside the town. Um, so I bring these kind of experiences back, you know, and let them revive me, you know. But I sometimes wonder, you know, because the billions of people on this planet, you know, most of them are living in cities, you know, and so
Yeah.
and it's so important to feel connected, to feel embedded in the natural world.
Hmm.
What do you write about it as well, I suppose?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't. I know I've never liked cities and I never wanted to live in a city, even
Mm,
though I'm close to it. This is like a village. Uh,
mm,
I don't have the feeling of a city, but
mm,
yeah, that's a real problem of how we've organized our lives to separate us from all that we are embedded in. And I think, you know, of the cave cultures, they clearly were in nature all the time and had very close contact. I mean, they did hunt and kill animals to eat when they
yeah.
had to, and they didn't feel good about it, about killing, but they had visions with the animals
Mm,
and the agreement with the animals. I've had hunters also in Novosibirsk, those in Russia who traveled, who were hunters in the forest there, and they say, oh, even now, the animals will do that. They know we honor them and love them, and we are grateful to them, and they will tell us where they're going to be. And I'm thinking, you know, he lived in Novosibirsk, this one, and still had that contact being out in the forest. But the cave cultures, and of course, what they actually, and I talk about this in Emergence of Light, is that in order to, that relationship is that they so honored the animals and saw them as actually more
mm,
sacred than themselves and having the secrets of nature, that the rituals in the caves help them to realize that they are all one. And to have that experience that they evidently had of the animals sacrificing their lives for them to live, that's what they seem to have experienced. It's that's a whole other type of relating to nature, but I think it was a huge part of the cave cultures to survive that the animals, and I don't think that you know that was a hallucination on their part. I think that it's
mm,
the kind of relationship that we can have with the animals in nature. And of course, in South America, they're constantly talking about their power animal and how that animal knows more than they do and leads them into the deep understanding of nature. And uh, and my son had that with a Black Panther. He came home one day with his wrist bandaged, and I thought, "Oh, what's that?" He had a tattoo, and I thought, "Oh no!" But then when I saw that it was a Black Panther, his power animal, I said, "Well, I know you're never going to get a job in a big office downtown, so, but that was fine. He had that relationship of that animal telling him things he needed to know right here in the village, not out in deep nature. So, and I do think through Visionary World we can find ourselves in nature a lot in a very real, authentic way.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Lynn,
Okay,
for your
thanks.
question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I see a few hands up. We're going to start with Cecilia because I saw hers first, and then Aaron and Sue.
Hi, thank you. I almost feel like crying. I never cry, but I'm just so grateful to you, Betty, for talking with us and for your wisdom.
Oh.
I'm a fellow old woman and someone who loved Jung. He opened so many doors. I had guidance to read him from the time I was 13, and
Oh, wow.
but I couldn't understand him then. So every year I would go and I would get a book by him, somewhere, and look at it to see if I was ready yet. And it wasn't until I was 26 that I felt this is the time. And then I started ordering all the books.
Yeah.
And I never knew anybody up to that time or after for a while who had ever read him or knew anything about him. But
Same with me, yeah.
yeah, but because I'd always loved myths and fairy tales growing up and had special things happening with animals that I just fell right into it. But that isn't what I wanted to say, other than I'm a sort of fellow traveler in a way. Um, well, I'll tell a kind of short anecdote about crows. Um, I decided I wanted to try to communicate with crows, with birds. I hadn't done that before. And so I knew where they used to drink in the morning sometimes. So I walked over there at 8, and sure enough, they were there having a drink in the lake. And I just stood still. I don't know how to communicate. And I just was in peace and beaming love, and just like that. Whoops. Wait a second. I've got sent a voicemail. Okay. I think I'm back. And then one of the crows came and landed on a branch right near me and was just looking at me. And so then I tried to send the message that I wanted to start feeding them. And I didn't know if anything worked. And I went home. And then the next afternoon, out my window, right where I sit, there was a crow marching around right on the cement right outside the window. So I was like, wow. So I went and threw something out, and then I started to feed them there. And then one day it was, I needed to move. I had to leave, and it was going to be my last day there. And a crow that seemed like the lead crow, I don't know if it was, landed on a branch near me and just regarded me with this. It was just like a deep, long look, and that never happened. And I felt like it was goodbye, and we appreciate you. We
That's so
appreciate
good.
you. And it was just this
Oh,
loving,
beautiful.
long. And then the next chapter in the crow story was I moved to San Francisco for almost 2 years. I don't like cities at all. I was in the Marina District, which isn't too bad for a city. And there are crows and seagulls around, and I had sort of a little back garden where I was renting to. So I thought, well, let me see if I can do it out here. So when I saw some crows around, I went over kind of where they were and tried to set up some line of communication. I was on a very busy street corner. And one of the crows came over and landed on one of those very sad little street trees right near me and looking at me. So again, I tried to send the message, I would like to start feeding you. And I went home, and it was about a 20-minute walk. It wasn't just that block, it was this way and that way, a big city, And I went home, didn't think anything would happen. And sure enough, the next morning, there was a crow right outside my back door. And I started feeding the crows there. So friendship travels is the moral of this story.
Well, yes, and it took some attention, paying attention, observation, being aware, and actually calling to them. Yes, yes. During the deaths, there were so many crows here, and there was a big tree out in back where they all met to have their meetings. And they would carry on, and then immediately all go. But I felt so close to the crows during those years, and after that, something happened. They all disappeared. But I just felt we were kind of all going through something together. There's nothing rational about that, but I had a very close feeling with all those crows in the front and backyard and the trees, and somehow or other, they were stabilizing for me, and I have no rational explanation for that.
Well, we're all social creatures, and right now, in my very limited circumstances, I have something going on with a spider here, and actually quite a background with spiders among other animals. So that's kind of a friendly little spirit there up in the corner. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for sharing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Aaron, I think your hand was next.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having this conversation. This is wonderful. Betty, I read your book and found it this summer and thought it was wonderful. And I also watched the documentary, and it resonated really well with a lot of my own writing and everything, and especially the concept that you have about the way the light web kind of works to help program, I think, the consciousness of humanity, and maybe offer some new emotions, ideas, and things that weren't there before. And I was visiting some drum circles and going to some different dancing events and working on just getting more in tune with myself, and started seeing more synchronicities. And I actually met someone at a ecstatic dance event that was really out of the norm for me, following kind of some of those synchronicities, who had also read your book and watched the documentary, which was really an unusual kind of synchronicity for me. And so I guess my main question is there seems to be a difference, I think, between seeing visions and then acting on your visions, and then moving from just perceiving some of the synchronicities to a term that's pretty new, I think, in the sphere, and I've heard it called synchromystic. You talk a lot about the mystics and the shamans, and I think of the synchronistic as we move to start to perceive what is the reoccurring divine pattern that we're starting to perceive from these synchronicities as we move into not just seeing the visions and maybe opening up the different channels in our left and right brain, but actually trying to understand those patterns and consciously commune with it. And so I wonder, I'm sure you've gone through that same process as trying to move from seeing visions to acting visions and trying to see the pattern in those synchronicities. So how would you recommend that we navigate that, especially, like my experience, I'm meeting people who have read the same book, and I actually just got back from hanging out with them this weekend where we interacted. I'm a man, but I was hanging out with women that were, I'd say, more in a really close circle, and they really opened up and shared a lot of things that they hadn't before in their friend group, and it was a very healing experience. And I think I'll leave it there, since I'm
well, that's a very important thing. Sometimes what I've discovered is that I had a dream or a vision, and I didn't really understand it, and I think that's why I've always felt that with synchronicities, and obviously instead of dismissing them as just coincidence, it's just to hold them in our consciousness. And the vision that I was telling you about with the disc, it wasn't until much years later that I really started putting pieces together. For a long time, it was just phenomenal and it was powerful, and I held it in my heart, and I knew there was something very powerful going on. But it wasn't until after the deaths and even after visions that my husband had with the Merchants of Light, which is the name of the book, but I realized years later that the light that I had experienced, we could call it many things, but I also realized later, putting that piece together and other pieces, is that that this light has changed the energy field. It's heightened the frequency on the planet, so that people with a higher frequency can be born, and so that we can raise our frequency more easily, and that we are all relating to each other and doing the work a little more easily because the frequency on the planet is different. But it took me, just those two pieces together took years. And even later, and I thought my husband was kind of strange. Where did he come up with Merchants of Light? But since English wasn't his native language, he would sometimes come up with strange combinations. But later I realized the Merchants of Light were a part of these Renaissance periods in which this ancient knowledge was remembered. For instance, during the Rosicrucian period that I talk about in the book, there were the Merchants of Light. I almost passed out when he wasn't, this was something he didn't just come up with. And of course, they gave him the hexagram of the ML, Merchants of Light, with the light coming from above down through this hexagram. And so it just took a long time. And then I had known or heard talk during the Rosicrucian period about the invisible college. And then later I had just a very powerful understanding that, of course, the invisible college, they call them Merchants of Light, Lords of Light, Serpents of Light. I mean, they're light beings from so many realms who have come to the earth to help us. And that, yes, there is an invisible college. And these beings in the invisible world are working with us. And we're part of that mystery school. Well, I was just so amazed, so each piece is kind of interesting that we don't sometimes get it all at once. But it's just that to pay attention, to keep looking. And then strangely, I sometimes think, well, why did it take me so long? But maybe it was the right time to find a piece to put it together. So I guess my answer is yes. I think we just have to be observant, and we begin to make those connections. And maybe it's at the right time. Maybe I couldn't have held it all at one time. I don't know. I don't know if that answers anything or not. But
Yes, thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, Erin, for your question. And thank you for being here. We'll go to Sue and then to Kate.
Me?
Yeah.
My question is, I think, a little bit self-serving. I was born a gardener. It wasn't what I was professionally paid for, actually. And I'm so connected to the earth, what I grow, and the earthworms. And every professional job I've had, it was in medicine. I have talked to administration, and they reluctantly would let me put in a garden to help patients everywhere, psych, geriatrics, community gardens. And I'm 21 years retired. I'm still gardening. I've gardened in the city, everywhere. And it's my meditation, it's my health. I can't seem to find a way to share it with anyone else. We're out in the country. A lot of people garden out here, but a lot of people don't. And it's the self-serving part is I'd like to make a difference, but I also believe in it so much. It's so therapeutic. I garden in the winter. I garden in the house. I just talking to the plants. I'm so connected. I don't seem to know where to start. I have limitations with driving and with age and with energy, so I could probably get around all of those. So I guess I would like some suggestions on how to share it, which is the self-serving part of me. How do I make a difference? I even write a garden column, and I still feel that I can't share. It's like you bake a lot of food or something, and then you give it to somebody because they're hungry. And I don't know if that's a question.
Maybe other people would have something. I think what I've found in my own life is that, in working with the soil like that in your relationship, I love to hear that, to know that. Maybe the column is one way, just you're talking about it. And my mother and my father were great gardeners. And when we weren't in the city, when we were in the country, they had large gardens and loved it. And but I think that your love for it, your observation of it, I think that you were giving it, and I used to hear this when I was younger and I didn't accept it. But what I think now in my old age is that that love and that knowledge and that experience you were giving to the field, because whatever, we are an integral part of the biofield, and that care and attention and love, appreciation is energy you're giving to the field. And so you are giving it, and it changes the field for all of us. I used to hear that, as I said, and didn't accept it, or that one Buddha can change the world by simply meditating in a cave. But I do think that what we do and love, and that we are giving it to the field. That's one way. Maybe others would have an idea of how you could extend it in time and space in a way that would be satisfying to you. I wish I had someone to come here, and I keep thinking, oh, I would love to have, I've grown some things, but I'm, I only have so much time and energy, and I'd have to learn how to do that. But I often have a dream of having a garden, when doing that. And so you might inspire some people like me to do it, in a column. I would have to have someone teach me how. My father would be quite unhappy with me that I don't know these things, but I don't.
Well, thank you. That, like I said, I think it's a self-serving question. And if I were still didn't have my husband to drive me around, I've always said I would go to people's houses and garden for them for free.
See, that you're the person I was looking for.
Well, I know where Claremont is. My kids live down there, just in Southern Oregon. Maybe when I'm down in LA, I'll come and pull some weeds for you.
But I think, I can remember as a kid in my father's garden, and it was his garden. My mother did the canning on a wood stove with a pressure cooker. But I remember just how amazing that, these things come out of the earth from a seed. It is a phenomenal kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
It is amazing, Betty. I've always said, I could plant a redwood tree seed, but I'm not the one that makes it grow. It is a cosmic. It's like I'm not a grower or healer. I just put the seed in there.
I mean, that we put it in the soil. That is such a beautiful symbolic lesson for us, that if we just allow these seeds in us to develop in the best way we can, I mean, we are, again, back to the image of just being so intricately related and a part of, and nature itself, that we can't do anything alone. It's just absolutely, really, we're never doing anything alone. If the cosmic field weren't flowing through us, we couldn't even talk to each other, So it's and that's a beautiful thing with gardening. It's such a beautiful symbol of life and the magic of it.
You know what? I appreciate everything you just said, because I just maybe put on a different pair of glasses to look at it a little differently. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your question. All right, Kate, we'll go to you next.
I'll mute myself. Namaste to all precious dear souls very gathered in this beautiful space.
Thank you.
And Betty, thank you so much. I missed you. You've done so much through your books for me on my own journey. And it's somehow I followed you for a while. And like we're sharing right now about how the divine works things out and serendipity. And here's this email from your precious Kimberly. And I'm kind of in my darkest through my grieving. I lost my son in 2023, and I try not to say lost because I know he actually promoted to higher realms. But you were just such a beam of light for me. And what everyone is saying here, everything is for a reason. Just like listening to Sue and her experience with gardening, or Erin and sharing how we meet people, and what Gay was saying, sometimes we don't really click, and not everyone is on the same level with us. But like what Gay was saying, if we connect back with our heart, get out of the mind, get into the heart, and use that love language, oh my gosh, what happens? And from my personal experience, I don't want to like take too much time, but I want to share that I was in energy healing, holistic health, so many things. And here's this grief coming into my life. And it seems like I lost I totally lost my connection to all the spiritual things that I've always known, even like from birth or young childhood. And it's amazing what life will do to us. But even recently, I heard that sometimes in order to open our heart, it needs to be broken and things, need to happen or whatever. But what I was going to say in iterating on Gay's thought that if we meet some people and we know they're not quite there, but we all are beings of light, and eventually they get on their journey to that point where they are receptible and they can receive all that knowledge and accept their divinity with themselves. I feel like right now, what a time to be alive. It's definitely like major awakening. And I love seeing among our masculine men awakening to their divine feminine and working on that balance, just like meeting their feminine and masculine, just to be this best human, best version of yourself. So I feel like some of us just need to be on that exact level. I had background in corporate marketing. I was sales and marketing person. And then I got into while my son was still alive, into meditation and yoga. And I created a blog on Instagram, maybe something for Sue also, just try to get on social media and just put it out there. Because really, you think about technology and things that are available to us spiritual workers as just the tools to get out and keep shining that light, keep those energies up and high, and just being in this love and light kind of state. So I'll share with you guys really quick. My background is I'm Russian Ukrainian. So my peak of my Instagram was right while my son was alive. And that's when all that conflict began. But I was just teaching people on meditation and yoga, something that helped me get in good shape, just find that balance, mind, body, spirit. And you will not believe it, like how people connect. In spite of what's going on in the world, governments, whatever, we still connect on that spiritual divine level because we all come from light, we are the light, and with that light. And what Wim was saying, I was teaching meditations, and people, from that part of the world, they live in apartment buildings. There is no way to ground. But my grounding, earthing meditation was like getting so many likes and just views because people need it. And I'm like, just get a piece of wood, stand on it. And if you feel it, if you visualize it, it already gives you all the effects. So needless to say, a couple years later, I experienced this loss. And of course, I'm going through my own healing, grieving, all those stages. And right now, I understand how the world needs us. Even through our pain, we can still shine the light. We can still share. We can help other mothers heal. Other mothers that don't have that connection like you and I, we connect with our sons or with our departed ones. And some are just so distraught because they were either in institutionalized, organized religion and, they believe certain things. But I was just again amazed with this connection, even within this hour field, what you have created with the Zoom call. like with Cecilia sharing about birds, and Gay sharing about different people coming into our space, and then Sue sharing about gardening, because I worked as a marketing manager for a huge corporation. So one of the flower bed I finally made into a garden. We started harvesting tomatoes, and you will not believe it, what those engineers, how much fun they had. And it's like those the engineers, I would never tell them what I think about yoga and meditation, but we still connected on that level. And I think right now this is what is so important, just connecting, embracing. And if someone is just still so off, so to say, but we just give them love on the level they can receive it at this point. And it's just you girls and guys, everyone just gave me goosebumps, and in the energy energy groups, we call it antennas, it's like our spiritual antennas, because we are really in the synchronicity, and that's what we can do, just keep shining. And thank you so much, and namaste to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think that one of the most important things that coming out of this left brain world in which nothing has any meaning is that we have to know there is no death, and after writing my first book about Pishti's death, so many parents I talked with, and some could not find a path of healing, but the majority were transformed by the experience, and realizing through their own experiences that we really are meant to be connected to the other world. It's not natural to be separated from people we love who are in the other dimension. I mean, we have to, our ancestors knew how to structure rituals or pathways to the spirits in nature and to the spirits in the other world and connect them, and also how to be connected with those who are in the other dimension. And so many of them are working with us now to heal the world. And we need to be able to have contact with them and know, and it's our heritage to be connected and have conversations with that other world. And I think we're putting up the phone lines, all over the world to the other dimension, so that more and more of us are able to do it.
Thank you so much, Kate and Cecilia and everyone. I wanted to say, Kate, just one small thing. It sounds like an advert, but it's not really. On Kerulos, we've started it's called Vital Breath for Earth, and it meets on Wednesdays, 12 p.m. Pacific Coast, West Coast. And it's a healing time just for people to come together to meditate for Earth and being with Earth. And it's a silent meditation. And I'm just mentioning that because it's just a gesture for us to have a space to be Earth. And then also Wim and Betty, your comment about living in cities. I guess my thing is, I don't. So I'm very fortunate from my point of view, but we're earth beings. And I think that's the most important thing to really communicate to people living in cities. One of our next speakers actually is named Tiant Mitchell. His name is Mitch. He's in prison for life, and he does meditation and mindfulness within the prison. And it's this notion of we are earth beings. And I think just the remembering and the reminding and the recognition that we are earth beings is, sort of the image that comes up to me are the flowers breaking through the concrete. And so even though we're in these places that are so anti-love seeming, and whatever, is that we do have this very powerful source. We are the earth. And so it's just to really remind ourselves and remind each other of that. Thank you so much.
Well, I think it is so important that we have a really deeper sense of who we are, that we're not these separated individuals running around, but that we are deeply rooted. We are not just rooted, we are the earth, we are a part of all of it, and of the galaxies. We're a part of it all, so intricately a part, that when we don't know that and we behave in a way that is contradictory to that, I think we're in great pain. So any way that we can find to experience that powerful connectedness. I mean, we are cosmic beings. We are here, as Jude Currivan, who's a cosmologist and so many other things. She said, we are all both manifestations of this great holographic field. We are both manifestations of it, but also co-creators with it. So we've manifested ourselves and we are co-creators with all that is. And anyone who wants to have power over us always wants to make us feel like we're nothing. You know, from 621 BCE, when the Deuteronomists told the dreadful story of not to eat of the fruit of life and know who we are, that we're nothing and we're not worthy of the Garden of Eden. Well, we're still hearing those stories about us today. So it's so important for us to remember that who we really are. We are this holographic field. At every point in the field is all of the information of the field that is available to us, and the heart. The heart, we're connected. Each one of us, as Brian Swim says, is at the heart of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
We have such power, and we just have to realize it and live that kind of life. But over the centuries, the stories we've been given is that we are nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're discovering that that's just not true. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And how to live with that, how to create with that knowledge.
Betty, I wanted you to say that just a few hours ago, Olivia and I were meeting with Jude Currivan.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
We're working, and I bring that up, you know, not for you just personally, but in the sense of, you know, it's like these isolated stars, you know, are just coalescing. It's like, you know, water droplets coalescing, and I think that feeling is so important. The question that I asked you earlier, you know, how can we kind of, it's so important to be validated in the sense that, well, no, that was like some crazy thing I felt, or it doesn't mean anything. And so
yeah.
having these drops of water to be able to coalesce,
yeah,
and empower our sense of our self-knowledge and our self-knowing. So,
yes, and to know we're not crazy. You know, I think to have those that we can share that with and who validate, I mean, it's very, very important. But Jude Currivan, her life is, I mean, that she was, as a child, taught by Hermes Trismegistus Thoth. I mean, when she was a child. And she says that wherever she wants to say it, and believe it or not believe. But I believe it. I am quite sure. I mean, that's so amazing. I think that once we can, what was it someone said, that reality is only what we'll allow ourselves to believe it to be? So when we know that these incredible things can happen, that these children like Jude could have this intelligence, whatever we want to name it, come at night and teach her, I think anything is possible. And once we can begin to believe that, all kinds of magic will happen, I think.
Beautiful.
Maybe I like to say something. I'm actually reading this book at the moment, you know, Jude Currivan. It's beside here. You know?
That's great.
Talk about a synchronicity.
Anyway, but what was said about Earth beings, I totally believe that, you know. So maybe I was a bit too negative on city life, you know. But yeah, also, you know, it's not just a city life. Also, people having office jobs, you know, being occupied, you know, living indoors all the time.
Oh, I know.
That sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But you wonder, and there's so many people on this planet living that way, you know, how can we make them more aware?
I know.
Maybe it happens, maybe the Earth itself creates the change, you know, the transformation.
I don't know. I know that when I was a child, my parents, of course, we had lived in nature, and the war, World War II, started, and they went to the north where my father could get a job. And the whole time of my childhood, all they talked about, I thought as a child, was going back to nature, going back home, going back out of the city, because they were in the city. And I used to think, well, if they want to do it, why don't they do it? But of course, I didn't realize all the complications. But here I grew up with a family that was always, once it was in the city, could talk about nothing else and longed for nothing more than being back in the country, you know?
Yeah.
It's and I'm sure there are many people in this, some want to be there, but and they may later have a different feeling, but there are probably many, you know, who would just love to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And as you say, maybe there will be things that will happen in our culture or in nature itself that will draw us in a more creative way back to her.
I think it's happening
Yeah.
just by just this session and you know that we are the earth. I know I'm repeating myself, but we are the earth, and to say that we have that innate quote unquote power, you know, and then that influences so many people. The image that always strikes me is, you know, and I see that, you know, Sue, getting back to your planting, you know, a sunflower seed will come from, you know, fall down from one of the birds I'm feeding, and then, you know, it's like dark, it's like dry soil, and it just bursts through. It just bursts through. And that creates all of these different cracks. And then other things start popping up in that way.
Oh, I like it. That's a good image. Yeah. So it's happening. Yeah, it's happening. That's good. I believe that too. I do. Well, we wouldn't be here if it weren't happening. Yeah.
I also want to confirm on that because, you know, just yesterday I was sharing with my husband YouTube video of two YouTubers and they're gardeners, younger people. And that's what really, I'm in my 40s. So to me, it's like, oh my gosh, this generation is all into it. And one guy, he has a luxury living out in the country, but the other one is just in a residential lot. And he created this Eden on earth. So, and I love seeing that, and it's really happening, just like Gay said, it is happening, you guys. So just, so
Yeah.
yes, we can have our faith and.
Great.
Well, I just want to say, Betty, you know, I think everyone here has been touched in the same way by your work and you, and what a tremendous gift and star gift and earth gift that you've given.
Oh, well, thank you. I think, you know, each of us come with a gift, and so often we don't even know that there's any gift, and then we realize that we're with other people and receiving gifts, and that's the way it happens, and all these gifts begin to blossom, and we're part of it all, you know. So I'm very grateful that anything I've done can can be considered a gift. I'm grateful.
So beautiful. This has been such an incredible conversation. So many wonderful questions. Yeah, Wim.
Maybe I still have a question. I read you've written a new book, you know, it's coming out, you know.
Yes, Kim put that in. I said, yes, I've just about got it finished. It's on the, what's the title? Can't remember the title now. But it's about the heart, the evolutionary power of the heart, and how we lost the blueprint, but have rediscovered it, you know. And
I'm looking forward to it anyway.
Oh, thank you. It makes me nervous to think about it. I said, Kim, what did you put that in there for? She says, because now you'll have to get it out.
Holding you accountable.
Yeah, right.
Well, we have a couple of last comments in the chat that I will read out before we close. The first from Aaron, who says, for me, it seems like novel experiences that I embark on provide space for the light web to move the pieces, to bring the right connections into my life. The more radical the comfortable pattern break, then the more opportunity there seems to be for new energy to come in. Also trying to sync to the nature rhythms and meditating in the mountains.
Oh, that's very nice. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Allowing the old to dissolve will give the space for the new to appear. Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Yeah.
Beautiful, Erin. Thank you. And the next is from Diane, who says, thank you so much, Betty, for your time and sharing. I came across your interview with Anthony Chain and was significantly moved. Separately, I am a Pitzer College grad where I first experienced Qigong action, and I understand your love of Claremont.
Oh, Pitzer, yes. I have friends who taught at Pitzer, now retired. Yeah, Pitzer's around the corner. That's great. Wonderful.
My questions are based around an experience I had in 2017. I had an orb come through my living room window midday while I was relaxing on the couch. I heard it telepathically say, "Oh, there she is." It then flew into me and was immediately overwhelmed by an intense divine love and broke out in intense crying. I've had experiences since and have recalled and realized I've been having experiences since childhood. Today, I still struggle with sharing, and although I have looked for folks with whom to connect and proceed in creating together with, there have been stop signs per se. Is it possible to join in with the Visionaries group?
Oh, certainly. Well, that's wonderful. And I'm so amazed with people sharing those experiences. It encourages everybody. And all the person would, I don't know who it was who wrote that, but
It was me.
oh, with you,
I
Daniel.
have a
Good.
little, I'm a little bit ill, so I didn't know if I could speak well,
okay,
but
good.
yeah, thank you.
Well, yes, you can be a part of Visionaries.
All right.
If you could, I don't know how, you just have to get in touch with the Comlock Center, Kim, or
Okay.
me. Anyway,
Okay.
do you have my email or Kim's email, Comlock?
I don't, but I can look for it. I just connected to the link with the Kerulos Center, and I think I could send an email that way.
We can provide a link.
Yeah,
however
I'm gonna put my email into the chat. You can email me and I will send
Okay.
you
Oh,
Oh,
that's
wonderful.
Kim's email if that's okay, Betty.
Well,
Yeah,
that would be wonderful. We'd love to. Are you in Claremont or no?
I wish.
Not anymore.
No, I'm up in the Bay Area.
Oh.
And
Oh, well-
Sharon Snowis, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she was my Qigong professor at Pitzer and got me involved in more of
that's
the
great.
Eastern understanding of things versus
Mhm.
my background. And I'm still in touch with her. And I had reached out to her after my experience because it was so overwhelming. And I have to be very careful with whom I share because
Yeah.
I met with a lot of disbelief, and then and
Yeah.
then I started questioning myself, and I'm like, no, I didn't make that up, and
I
I've had
know
experiences since.
that's what we go through. I still do it. We all, but
I'm
now the
cocooned.
yeah, but the Visionaries would be a
cocooning
good
myself,
group.
yeah.
For you, because you
Okay,
can
yeah.
certainly tell it. They're having others, and it encourages them, and that's wonderful. So that's great.
Thank
You'll
you.
get the email for sure. So we'll
Okay,
we'll
all
wait to
right.
hear from you.
All right,
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you.
And we meet. What is this? December? Yeah, January will be the next meeting.
Okay,
I believe.
all right.
Yes,
Anyway, Kim handles that.
Diane, my email is in the chat, and anyone else who's interested in
Yeah.
reaching out
Okay.
for one reason or another, please utilize it.
Yes, and
Wonderful.
and the Visionaries is a place. That's why it was started. As I had this strange experience in which I had traveled to New York to visit a young woman who had been like my Hungarian daughter. I brought her over to study, and she was married and living there. And Kimberly, who's the chairman of the or head of the Claremont Comlock Center, had breast cancer, and she just finished her treatment. Well, they took us out to New York and celebrated everything, and gave us the guest room. And Kim was on one side of the room, I was on the other, and suddenly I had this experience of this that came out of her and went toward the window, and I looked at the window, and it was an actual image of a woman that had like gauze wrapped around her, but it was coming undone from the breast up. I didn't know what that meant. But first of all, I yelled out, "What are you doing?" And of course, she was gone. But I realized that here was an experience I did not understand, but it was very clearly some kind of energy coming from Kim. And I know she was in stress, some stress with the treatment. And so when I mentioned it to Bob and Fran Ginsberg, who started the Forever Family Foundation, then Fran, who's now on the other side, immediately said, we need a visionaries group. You have to start this visionaries group where people can, sometimes we don't know what they mean. And just gradually we put pieces together and we know better. But so the visionaries group came out of vision that I didn't understand. and it's just been, it's many years now. And many people have come and been able to tell their stories and have good listeners.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I was so excited to get that email last night. So yeah, thanks.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Wonderful.
And I look forward to joining in. I have had experiences as well with what I've seen from dark shadows come out of family members and some other things. And in some cases, I actually immediately know what it's related to. And then also positive ones. Some have been due to illness or other things, and then positive ones as well. So I look forward to being able to speak out loud about it.
You can do it. And question all kinds of things. So great. We'll look forward to you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this has been incredible. I can't think of a better way to close out our series for 2024. Thank you to all of you, each of you, for being here and for everything that you've shared and asked today. It's been wonderful to speak with all of you. And Betty, thank you so much for sharing all your time and wisdom with us. It's been just transformational and so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I've had the same experience with you. I'm so grateful to all of you. Thank you so much. So you'll have a wonderful year coming up.
Yes, this is our last Living One for this year, but we do have, as Gay mentioned, our first guest scheduled for 2025. We will be releasing a pre-recorded conversation with Tiant Professor Mitch Mitchell soon after January 14th, so you can all keep an eye out for that. Mitch is a psychology department peer assistant in a state prison in Western Pennsylvania, where he teaches cognitive behavioral therapy classes and suicide prevention. Keep an eye on your email and our Kerulos social media for more information about this, which will be coming in the coming weeks. And as always, if you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Kerulos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website, kerulos.org. Thank you again, everybody, and Betty, for being here and sharing all your time and your afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We'll see you all soon.
Everyone stay in touch.
Take good care.
Stay in touch.
Thank you.